Shalom. Thanks for joining me. I'm continuing to read in Matthew chapter 15 using the New International Version, and beginning in verse 29. Remember, this chapter is all about Jesus breaking boundaries, breaking barriers. And earlier in the beginning, he talked about the tradition of the elders, the tradition versus the commandment of God with regards to honoring your father and your mother, the tradition of washing your hands versus the commandment of God that says, you don't even have to do that. The tradition of breaking the barrier of Jesus going into Gentile territory and healing the daughter of a Canaanite woman. Remember, the Canaanites were the enemies of Israel. And here's an enemy of Israel coming and acknowledging, by the way, that Jesus is Lord and that he is the son of David. That's a messianic statement. This Canaanite woman had a great faith, and Jesus even said, "You have a great faith." Only the second person that Jesus ever said that to, and both of them were Gentiles. The first one was the Roman centurion who said, "You could come and heal my servant, but you don't have to come to the house. You just speak the word of command because I know what your authority is." So that's a pretty interesting thing. So this is the finishing of this chapter, and it's got two parts to it. One is Jesus healing a very large crowd of people, and then feeding 4,000 people. We know earlier that Jesus fed 5,000 men, and that didn't count the women and the children. Now Jesus is feeding 4,000 men. Again, it doesn't count the women and the children. So here are these two sections of the end of chapter 15. And I'm going to read them beginning of verse 29. He goes to the end, which is verse 39. Jesus left there, that is, he was up there in Tyre and Sidon. Now he's coming back from the north, back down into Galilee. Jesus left there and went along the Sea of Galilee, and then he went up on a mountainside and sat down. Great crowds came to him, bringing the lame, the blind, the crippled, the mute, and many others, and laid them at his feet, and he healed them. The people were amazed when they saw the mute speaking, the crippled made well, the lame walking, and the blind seeing, and they praised the God of Israel. So here are people seeing what God is doing through Jesus and recognizing who Jesus is, and they are praising the God of Israel. These miracles of healing of all sorts of ailments, all sorts of disabilities, this is powerful. This is what is happening here now in the northern Sea of Galilee. No one is sure which mountain Jesus went up on. No one is really 100% sure which mountain Jesus went up on when he taught the Sermon on the Mount, or later when he fed the 5,000. So now we have the same kind of vague mountain area. There are little hills and stuff. There's a few areas that are hilly enough and large enough to accommodate large crowds. Could have been one of them. No one can say for certain. No one left behind a little plaque and said, here's where he fed all these people. So you can only guess. What can we say? Verse 32, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, "I have compassion for these people. They've already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. I do not want to send them away hungry, or they may collapse on the way." Very similar to what Jesus was saying to his disciples back when he fed the 5,000. So his disciples answered and said, "Where can we get enough bread in this remote place to feed such a crowd?" Similar story, isn't it? "How many loaves do you have?" Jesus asked. "7," they replied, "and a few small fish." He told the crowd to sit down on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves and the fish, and when he had given thanks, he broke them and gave them to the disciples, and they in turn to the people. Exactly what he did when he fed the 5,000. He gave a bracha, a blessing, and as he blessed the bread and blessed the fish, handed it to his disciples, broke it up, handed it to the disciples. They handed it down to the crowd, and it kept going and kept going and kept going. And then watch what happens. They all ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. The number of those who ate was 4,000 men, besides women and children. After Jesus had sent the crowd away, he got into the boat and went to the vicinity of Magadan. Talk about that in the next video. But Jesus had compassion on the crowd that had been with him for 3 days. Very likely people had carried some food, but at the end of this time, they'd run out of food for sure. Disciples want to know where we could get all this food. They had a little bit themselves, enough probably to feed themselves enough. They had 7 loaves and a few fish. And when you give what you have to Jesus, he can multiply it in ways you and I cannot. And that's what they did. They gave it to Jesus. And as he blessed it, he gave it out to them, and they in turn gave it to the crowd and kept getting passed on and passed on. At the end, those who had no food had ate so much that they were full. And there were leftovers. 7 basketfuls of leftover. After, in a little bit later in the next chapter, that's going to become significant to remember that. Okay? But right now it isn't. So he feeds them again. This is just like the prophet Elijah. He did a miraculous feeding of 100 prophets. So later in the Gospels, as Jesus fed 5,000, now this time he feeds 4,000. And they only just counted the men, not the women and the children. So the crowd of 5,000 could have been as much as 10 and 12,000 or more. The crowd of 4,000 here could have been as much as 6, 8, 10, 12,000 again. Lots of people. But he fed them. And that reminds you and me all the time that whatever it is we have, if we give it to Jesus, he can multiply it and use it in ways we can only dream. What do you have? Give it to Jesus. He'll use it for his glory and his kingdom, and others will be blessed by your sacrificial giving. Thanks for joining me.